The call came in at dawn. A woman's body had been found by a roadside in Leicestershire, England. Shot in the head, no identification, no witnesses. Just a dead woman in a ditch, her life violently cut short. As I rode my horse to the scene, the mist clung to the fields, casting a haunting silence over the countryside. Something about this case felt off from the start. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the deeper I looked, the more tangled the story became. When I arrived at the scene, the sight was grim. The woman lay, crumpled in the grass, blood pooling beneath her head. She was dressed in an expensive dress, but her shoes were missing. Next to her was a curious detail, a green bicycle lying on its side. The bike looked old, but well maintained. It had no registration number and no distinctive markings, just green. I stared at it, feeling like it was trying to tell me something. Her purse was missing, but she had a small locket around her neck. Inside was a photograph of a man. Could be a lover, could be a brother. I didn't know yet. The locals had no idea who she was. No one had heard a gunshot. It was like she had simply materialized here, only to vanish into death. The first real clue came from a scrap of paper found near her body. It was torn and water damaged, but a few words were legible: Rothley and appointment. Rothley was a village nearby. I had no choice but to head there and start asking questions. At a local inn, I met with the innkeeper. When I described the woman, he paled slightly. He'd seen her before, he said. She had been staying at the inn under the name Bella Wright. She was a school teacher from the nearby village of Stoughton, and she had rented a room just a few days ago. I could tell he wasn't saying everything he knew, though, so I pressed him. She wasn't alone, he finally admitted. She was seen with a man, tall, dark hair. They were riding bicycles together, him on a green one. They looked like they were arguing. A green bicycle. My heart quickened. I asked if the man had checked in at the inn. The innkeeper shook his head. Number he never stayed, just came and went. It was a small lead, but I was on the trail of this mysterious man. The next stop was Bella's home village. I met with her family, who were devastated to hear the news of her murder. They described her as kind, thoughtful, with no known enemies. But then her mother mentioned something curious. Bella had been seeing a man, someone she barely knew. He'd approached her a few months back, offering to take her on the bicycle rides. They had grown close, but Bella had confided in her mother that something about him frightened her. She had been planning to break things off. The green bicycle came up again. The man had always been on that same strange green bike. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more. I went back to the crime scene, walking the area again, searching for anything I might have missed. That's when I noticed it. Hidden in the tall grass near the road, a small, glinting object. I crouched down and picked it up. It was a bullet casing. My pulse quickened. This was no robbery gone wrong. This was an execution. The casing didn't match anything from local weapons, which suggested the killer was an outsider, someone who planned the crime carefully. And then there was the bike. I kept coming back to the damn bike. Why leave it behind? It felt like both a clue and a taunt. Days passed, and I scoured every lead, but the green bicycle was my best chance. I put word out to local shops and dealers. One day, a mechanic contacted me, saying he had worked on a bike just like the one I described for a man who matched the innkeeper's description. The man's name, it turned out, was Ronald Light, a former military engineer with a past riddled with dark secrets. He was expelled from Oakham School in 1902 at age 17 for inappropriate behavior toward a young child. Later, he was dismissed from numerous jobs under a veil of suspicion, accused of arson, troubling behavior, attempts to lure a teenage girl, arson again, and even admitting to inappropriate behavior with a child, but never convicted. When I knocked on his door, he didn't seem surprised to see me. He even invited me in, offering tea. It was the calm confidence of a man who believed he had covered his tracks. I asked him about the green bicycle. His face barely flinched, but his hands tightened around the teacup. I sold that bike weeks ago, he claimed, but I could see the sweat on his brow. I wasn't convinced. When I brought up Bella Wright, his demeanor shifted slightly. He knew I was closing in. He admitted he had met Bella, but claimed they were just acquaintances, and he had nothing to do with her death. His story was neat, rehearsed, but one thing stood out. His alibi for the night of Bella's murder didn't hold up. The turning point came when I found another mechanic who confirmed that Light had indeed brought in the green bicycle after Bella's murder for repairs. And the clincher? The repair involved changing a damaged part that matched what I had found at the scene. It was over for Ronald Light. We arrested him, and the trial began. Light's defense was shaky, but despite the evidence, something unexpected happened. The jury couldn't unanimously convict him. There were doubts, perhaps due to his social standing, perhaps because Bella had no known enemies, and Light seemed harmless on the surface. Incredibly, Ronald Light was acquitted. He walked away a free man despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence. To this day, Bella Wright's murder remains officially unsolved. The green bicycle was never seen again, and Light lived the rest of his life in relative obscurity. But I know, deep down, I know that Ronald Light killed her. The mystery, though, is why. Was it rage? Was it jealousy? Or something darker that only he could understand? As I closed the case, I couldn't shake the feeling that justice hadn't been served. Bella's life ended on a lonely country road with no one held accountable, and the green bicycle, once a symbol of freedom and companionship, became a chilling reminder of a crime that would haunt me forever.